All right, so strap yourselves in, folks. We are diving deep today. Really deep. We're talking about some newly declassified government files, and not just any files. These relate to three, count of three, major figures in American history.
Oh.
We're talking JFK,
Oh, yeah.
RFK,
Huge.
and MLK Jr.
It's like, wow, somebody just hit fast forward on history, right? I mean, for decades, right?
Yeah.
These files have been locked away.
Oh, yeah.
Totally fueling every, conspiracy theory under the sun. And now we're about to see what's actually in there.
Yeah, and what I find really interesting about this is that the release of JFK's assassination records, that was mandated by Congress back in '92.
Right.
But the RFK and MLK files, that's completely at the president's discretion. So it makes you wonder, what's the motive here?
Yeah, especially when you think about it. I mean, past presidents, even the one right before this administration, they kept delaying the full release of even just the JFK files, saying, oh, national security.
Right, right.
So it's different now.
Yeah. Like, is this really a commitment to transparency, or is there, something else going on here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this current executive order really doesn't mess around. The Director of National Intelligence and the Attorney General, they've got like 15 days.
15 days.
Yeah, 15 days to come up with a plan to release all the JFK records.
Wow. That's unheard of in government time.
It is. It's really fast.
Yeah.
And then RFK and MLK, they've got a bit longer.
Okay.
45 days. But that's still, pretty quick.
Yeah, it signals that there's some urgency here.
Definitely.
Yeah. It makes me think they're kind of maybe expecting something big, something that could have some really big repercussions. And that kind of brings us to what we really want to dive into today. What could those repercussions be? Like, what unintended consequences could come out of all this declassification? Yeah. Well, I mean, let's start with the most obvious one, right? Public trust.
Mm-mm.
What happens if these files, totally shake our faith in our institutions?
Right.
Like, what if we find out there were big intelligence failures or even, cover-ups related to these assassinations?
I mean, that's the thing that keeps me up at night, honestly. We're talking about events that have shaped how we understand American history. They still resonate today. Can you imagine the disillusionment if we find out that things weren't what they seemed?
And it's not even just about the past, right? This could have real consequences now. Could this lead to, new investigations, lawsuits against people, institutions?
Yeah, it's like opening this Pandora's box of potential legal battles. I mean, think about the families of these figures. They're still, looking for answers after all these years. Could this finally give them closure, or will it just, open old wounds again?
Yeah. It's a tough one. There's really no way to know how it'll play out. And we can't forget about the international angle either, right? Yeah. I mean, these files, they could have sensitive information about, foreign intelligence operations, diplomatic stuff. I mean, could this declassification strain relationships with our allies or even mess up current intelligence stuff?
It's definitely possible, right? What if the files show some kind of covert operation that puts a foreign government in a bad spot? I mean, the fallout from that could be huge.
It feels like this declassification could touch, every part of our society.
Yeah.
Our trust in institutions, our relationships with other countries. I mean, and that's really just the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. We're right on the edge of this massive historical event, and it could change how we see these huge moments in American history. And there's probably stuff that's going to happen that we can't even think of right now. Yeah.
It's almost overwhelming.
It is.
To think about. So what stands out to you as the most potentially impactful part of all this? Where should we start looking?
Considering the timeline, how fast this is all happening and how disruptive it could be, I think we really need to look at the potential consequences of, if they reveal intelligence failures or cover-ups. It just seems like the stakes are really high there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you. Let's unpack that.
Okay, so let's think about what might happen if these files show that there were real threats against JFK, RFK, MLK that intelligence agencies knew about but ignored or didn't handle well. Imagine the public outrage if it turns out these tragedies, could have been prevented.
I mean, that would be a huge blow to the credibility of the intelligence community, right? They'd have every right to question if they're even competent, if they can protect us from threats, foreign or domestic.
Yeah.
It could even lead to people demanding huge reforms or a total overhaul of these agencies.
But it's not even just about competence, is it? What if it goes deeper than that? What if these files actually point to a deliberate cover-up? Can you imagine? What if we find evidence that they actively hid information or even straight up misled the public about what they knew.
I mean, talk about a crisis of faith in our institutions.
Right.
That could, I mean, the implications for public trust, for democracy, like,
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. Think about Watergate.
Yeah.
Like how much that shook people's faith in the government, right?
Yeah, totally.
Now imagine something like that, but on top of the trauma of these assassinations.
It's a lot. Like it feels like we're standing on a fault line or something,
Yeah.
just waiting to see if the ground's going to give way.
It does, yeah. And if it does, I mean, who knows how far those tremors are going to go. Right?
Yeah.
This could change, I mean, everything from how we see these events to how we, even interact with our government today.
And it makes me think about, the families of these figures. Like imagine being, a Kennedy kid or a King child and growing up with these unsolved mysteries hanging over you. Would this declassification bring them closure?
No.
Or just, reopen all those old wounds?
Yeah. I mean, their perspective is so important here. It's their pain, their questions that need to be like at the front of our minds as we're dealing with all this.
Absolutely. Their stories are, I mean, such a powerful reminder of the human cost of these tragedies.
Yeah.
It's not just history, it's people's lives.
It is. It is. And speaking of, ripple effects and all that, we haven't even talked about the legal side of things. What if these files show, evidence of actual crimes?
Yeah.
By individuals? Institutions?
Yeah, could this lead to new investigations, prosecutions? Decades later, it's like, are we about to open like a whole new chapter in legal history?
I mean, imagine, like, what if there's evidence that comes out that points to, like, people who were never caught or even, like, a much bigger conspiracy? The legal fallout could be massive.
And we can't forget about the international impact, right? I mean, these files could have stuff about really sensitive foreign intelligence operations, things that could, I don't know, damage relationships with allies or even, mess up missions that are happening right now.
Right. Imagine, like, if something comes out about a Cold War operation that puts some foreign government in a really tough spot, or information that blows the cover of some, an intelligence source who's still active, the diplomatic fallout could be huge.
It's like every path we go down leads to a potential minefield.
It does, yeah.
We're talking about information that could completely rewrite how we see the past and reshape our present in ways we can't even imagine.
And that's exactly why this is such a big deal. You know, like we're stepping into the unknown here. There's no map for this.
Yeah, it's both exciting and a little terrifying, right? Like opening a door that's been locked for decades and having no idea what's on the other side.
Exactly. And it just shows you that history isn't, just some fixed thing. It's alive. It's changing all the time as we get new evidence and new perspectives.
And in this case, those new perspectives might come from some pretty unexpected places. Like, what if these files reveal information that changes how we think about some of the key players? Like people we thought we knew.
Yeah, what if we learn something that paints a totally different picture of someone like, I don't know, J. Edgar Hoover? Or even Robert Kennedy himself? Like, how would that change how we see their actions, their motivations?
It's like we're hitting the refresh button on history. And everything we thought we knew is up for grabs.
Yeah, it's almost like we're about to have this big national conversation about who we are, where we came from, what we believe.
And maybe that conversation is way overdue. Like these events have been hidden in secrecy for so long. It's fueled so much speculation, so much division. Maybe this declassification, as messy as it might be, maybe it's a chance to actually face the truth.
Maybe, even if it's, hard to hear.
Right. And maybe, just maybe, by facing those hard truths, we can start to heal some of those old wounds.
It's a nice thought. Something good coming out of all of this. Maybe this will inspire people to be, more committed to truth and justice, like recommit to the ideals that these figures fought for.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good thought. But, as we've been talking about, there's also the chance that these files could make things worse, right? Create new conflicts. It feels like we're walking a tightrope, and there's no guarantee we're going to make it to the other side.
That's true. But even if it's a bumpy ride, even if we end up with more questions than answers, searching for the truth is important. It's what makes us a free society, not one that hides from the past.
This deep dive has really made me think about that. We've gone from the initial shock of this announcement to thinking about all the possible consequences. And I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
It is. It's a story that's going to keep unfolding. Historians, journalists, regular people, they're all going to be going through these documents trying to put the pieces together, and that's something we should all be a part of.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about these deep dives. They're a starting point.
Yeah.
It's like a jumping off point for us to learn more.
So as we wrap up this part, I want to encourage you, our listeners, stay curious. We're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into this whole declassification thing with the JFK, RFK, and MLK Jr. files. I mean, it's been a wild ride, hasn't it? So many what ifs, so many like potential consequences we've talked about.
Yeah, a lot to take in. But, even with all the uncertainty, there's something kind of hopeful about this whole thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is huge, this move toward transparency. Even if it gets messy, it shows that we're, still committed to finding the truth and holding people accountable. Yeah, you're right. It's like a light at the end of the tunnel. Even if these files, tell us things we don't want to hear, just the fact that they're being released,
Yeah.
it reinforces the idea that we have a right to know,
Fun.
that we deserve to understand what shaped our world.
Exactly. And that knowledge, even if it's, unsettling, it can help us heal and grow. Like, think about other times in history when societies have had to confront these really dark parts of their past.
Yeah.
It's painful, but it's how we learn, how we get better.
It is. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's not just about, digging up old secrets. It's about understanding who we are
Yeah.
as individuals, as a nation. And who knows, maybe some good can come out of all this. Maybe it'll spark this renewed commitment to truth, to justice, to the things these figures fought for.
I hope so. I mean, imagine, what if these files, instead of dividing us, actually help bring us together? What if they inspire a new generation to get involved, to fight for a better world?
It's a nice thought, right? A vision worth working towards. But, we've also talked about the possibility that these files could do the opposite, make things worse, create new problems. It's a risky move, and there's no guarantee it'll turn out okay.
It is risky, but even if it's, a rough road, even if we end up with more questions and answers, the fact that we're searching for the truth, that's what matters. That's what sets us apart, That's what makes us a free society.
You know, this deep dive, it's really driven that point home for me. We started with the shock of this announcement, then went through all the what ifs, all the potential fallout, and I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
We have. And this story, it's going to keep going. Historians, researchers, journalists, everyday people, they're all going to be digging into these documents trying to figure out what it all means. And that's something we can all be a part of.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about these deep dives. They're not the end of the story. They're just the beginning. So, as we wrap up, I just want to say to our listeners, stay curious. When these files are released, go check them out. Read them carefully, think critically, and come to your own conclusions.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to, question things, ask the tough questions, demand answers. The past might be, set in stone, but how we understand it, how we learn from it, that's always changing.
It is. So go out there and explore. Until next time, keep searching for the truth.